The answering machine tape was still inside the machine when the police arrived. On the evening of October 4th, 1985, in the township of Millhaven, Morris County, New Jersey, population 4,200, a place of split-level homes and elm-lined streets where the same families had lived for 2 and 3 generations, a light rain had been falling since late afternoon. At 6:52 p.m., Carol Brandt's neighbor, Tom Ferris, noticed that her front door was standing open about 6 inches. He could see the porch light was on. He could see the television flickering inside. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the rain coming down on his shoulders, and then he walked to her door and knocked. No one answered. He pushed it open and called her name. The television was running. On the kitchen counter, a pot of tomato soup sat on the stove, with the gas still burning beneath it, beginning to scorch at the bottom. Carol Brandt was gone. What happened in the next 48 hours would set in motion an investigation that would consume 3 detectives, span 4 decades, and end only when a retired schoolteacher in Flemington, New Jersey, agreed to let a nurse draw a small vial of blood in the back of a county health van on a Tuesday morning in 2023. But to understand how this ended, you have to understand how it began. And to understand how it began, you first have to understand who Carol Brandt was. Carol Ann Brandt was 41 years old in the fall of 1985. She had lived in Millhaven for most of her adult life, had moved there from Trenton in 1968 when she married her husband Gerald, and had stayed on after Gerald passed from a heart attack in 1979, raising their 2 sons, Kevin and Paul, in the same split level on Birchwood Drive where the boys had grown up. Kevin was away at Rutgers by 1985. Paul was a junior at Millhaven High. Carol worked as a bookkeeper at Connolly Hardware on the main road through town, a position she had held for 9 years, and she was the kind of employee whose absence when she was sick made the whole office feel quietly off balance. She was, by every account that survives from those years, a woman of specific and reliable habits. She left for work at 7:40 every morning and stopped at the same Sunoco station on Cedar Avenue for the same large coffee, light and sweet, in the same paper cup. She was home by 5:15. She called her sister Marianne in Hackettstown every Sunday evening after the 6 o'clock news. She kept a small calendar on the kitchen wall beside the refrigerator where she logged appointments, grocery lists, and the occasional note in her careful Catholic school cursive. She drove a 1983 Ford Tempo, the color of faded rust. On October 4th, 1985, that calendar had one entry: dentist, 4 p.m., Dr. Nolan. She had been to that appointment. Dr. Nolan's receptionist would confirm she had checked out at approximately 4:45 p.m. and said she was heading home to get dinner started before Paul got back from football practice. Carol Brandt had made it home. She had put the soup on. She had sat down, because the cushions on the living room couch were pressed, the way they press when someone has been sitting, and at some point in the hour between when she walked through her front door and when Tom Ferris stood in the rain on her sidewalk, something had come through that door with her, or after her, or had been waiting. Paul Brandt got home from football practice at 7:15. His mother was gone. The soup had burned black. The call came in to the Morris County Sheriff's Office at 8:03 p.m. By 9:30, Detective Raymond Kalowski had arrived at Birchwood Drive and taken charge of the scene. Kalowski was 50 years old, a broad-shouldered man who had spent 22 years working homicides and missing persons in Morris County and was known in the department for the kind of unhurried competence that made younger detectives nervous. The way he moved through a scene slowly, touching nothing, speaking in low questions rather than statements. He had a son Paul's age. He would note in his case file that the soup was the first thing that told him this was not voluntary, She was coming back, he would write. The soup tells you she was coming back. In the first 72 hours, Kalowski and his team collected fiber samples from the living room. They lifted 5 distinct sets of fingerprints from the front door, the kitchen counter, and the frame of the back screen door, which had been unlatched from the outside. A detail that was documented and measured and then, for reasons that remain unclear in the case file, was not followed up with urgency. 3 of those 5 print sets were never matched to anyone. They sat in the evidence record for 38 years. The answering machine tape yielded 2 calls. One from Carol's sister Marianne, who had called on Sunday to ask whether Carol was coming to their mother's birthday dinner the following weekend. The other was a male voice, recorded at 6:14 p.m. on the evening of October 4th, 38 minutes before Tom Ferris knocked on the open door. The voice said only, "Carol, it's me. Call me back. No name. No number." The tape was preserved. That tape would become the single most discussed piece of evidence in the case. Who called at 6:14? Was Carol still in the house when it came in? Or had she already been taken? No one could answer that question in 1985, and for a very long time, no one could answer it at all. 2 men received close attention in those early weeks. The first was a neighbor named Gary Hunsaker, who had recently separated from his wife, and who, according to 2 separate neighbors, had been overly friendly toward Carol at the block association gathering the previous summer. He was interviewed 3 times. He submitted to a polygraph, which was inconclusive. His fingerprints were not among the 5 sets collected at the scene. By December, his name had been moved to a secondary list. The second was a man named Bernard Eckert, 48 years old, a substitute teacher who had done odd repair work for several homeowners on Birchwood Drive, including Carol, whom he had helped install a new storm door in the spring of 1984. He had access to the house layout. He knew the back door. Kalowski interviewed him twice, both times in the man's kitchen, and noted afterward that Eckert gave his answers in a specific way, too quickly at first, and then, on certain questions, too slowly. Not lying, exactly, withholding there was a difference, and Kalowski had spent enough years in rooms with enough people to feel it. But feeling it wasn't evidence, and evidence was what they didn't have. Marianne Brandt, Carol's sister, drove to the Morris County Sheriff's Office for the first time on October 15, 1985, 11 days after her sister disappeared. She was 44 years old, and she had taken the day off from her job at a fabric store in Hackettstown. She sat across from Kalowski for 2 hours, and then drove home and called every week after that. Every single week. Paul Brandt finished his junior year of high school in a house that still smelled like his mother's soup, until it didn't anymore. Kevin came home from Rutgers and never fully went back. The Ford Tempo sat in the driveway on Birchwood Drive for 14 months before the county moved it. No one in the family was willing to decide what to do with it. By 1990, 5 years had passed. The case file had been transferred twice within the department, following Kalowski when he moved to a different unit, and then remaining when he retired in 1993. By 1993, Raymond Kalowski was 68 years old. He cleaned out his desk on a Friday afternoon, left the office, and drove directly to a storage facility on Route 206, where he had rented a small unit 2 months earlier. He moved 3 boxes into that unit. The Brandt case file was in the middle box. He had made photocopies of everything: the fingerprint records, the voice tape transcript, the interview notes on Bernard Eckert. Everything. He told his wife that he was done with the job, but not with the case. She said she had always known those were 2 different things. By 1998, 13 years after Carol Brandt disappeared, The reward poster that had been taped in the window of Connolly Hardware since October 1985 had been replaced with a new one. Same photo, same phone number, reprinted because the first one had yellowed past legibility. The owner of the hardware store, Jim Connolly, had made that decision himself, without anyone asking him to. Paul Brandt was 30 years old by then. He had moved to Delaware. He called Marianne on his mother's birthday every year, October 22nd, and they talked for a long time. Kevin had married and had 2 children who had never met their grandmother. Marianne kept going to the Morris County Sheriff's Office, less often now, twice a year instead of every week, but she kept going. By 2010, 25 years had passed. Bernard Eckert had retired from substitute teaching and was living in Flemington. He attended his church. He was a familiar face in his community, a man people described as quiet and reliable. He had never been charged with anything. He had not been formally questioned since 1986. His name appeared in the Brandt case file as a person of interest, but the file had not been actively reviewed in years. Raymond Kalowski died in 2015. He was 90 years old. His wife gave the boxes from the storage unit to the Morris County Cold Case Unit, which had been formally established in 2012. Inside the middle box, on top of the photocopied interview notes, was a handwritten index card. It said, Eckert, back door. Voice on tape. Listen again. Every case covered here represents weeks of research, tracing records, and making sure real lives get the attention they deserve. If you believe this kind of work matters, take a moment right now to like the video and subscribe. Leave a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. That support is what keeps this going. Now let's get back to Carol Brandt. In September of 2022, Detective Sergeant Alicia Ferrone of the Morris County Cold Case Unit was assigned a review of 14 open cases from the 1980s as part of a statewide initiative that had been funded the previous year. Ferrone was 36 years old, had joined the department in 2011, and had a specific reputation. She read old case files the way some people read novels, from the first page to the last. And she noticed things in the margins. She found Kalowski's index card. She pulled the original tape from the evidence archive, the answering machine tape from October 4th, 1985, the one with the voice at 6:14 p.m. that said, Carol, it's me, call me back. Audio technology had changed considerably since 1985. She submitted it to the New Jersey State Police Audio Forensics Lab in Trenton. The lab was able to isolate the voice from the tape degradation and create a clean audio profile. It was not a match to Gary Hunsaker. It was not a match to any other voice in the investigation file. Then Ferrone went back to the fingerprints. The 3 unmatched sets from the scene. They had been entered into AFIS, the National Fingerprint Database, twice before, in 1994 and in 2008, and had returned no hits both times. She submitted them again in January 2023 through an expanded interstate database that had grown significantly in the intervening years. On March 14, 2023, at 11:20 in the morning, Sergeant Ferrone received a notification on her screen. One of the 3 unmatched sets from Birchwood Drive had returned a match. The match was to a set of prints taken during a routine civil matter, a property dispute, fingerprints collected as part of standard documentation in Hunterdon County in 2019. The name attached to those prints was Bernard Eckert. She read it once, closed the window, opened it again. Then she picked up the phone and called her supervisor. Her hands, she would say later, were completely steady. But she sat there for a moment after she dialed, before it rang, and thought about a woman who had put soup on the stove and never come back to it. The process from that point moved quickly. Ferrone coordinated with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office and the New Jersey State Police. A DNA sample was needed, something that could be matched against biological evidence still preserved from the original scene. Bernard Eckert, now 79 years old and in moderately declining health, had been identified as a potential subject. A health outreach program operating through his county was used as the collection mechanism, a voluntary blood draw at a mobile health screening van, entirely routine, conducted without Eckert's knowledge of its investigative purpose. He consented. He smiled at the nurse. He drove home. The DNA results came back in 6 weeks. They confirmed the fingerprint match and placed Bernard Eckert in Carol Brandt's home on the night of October 4th, 1985, not in the living room, not near the front door. At the back screen door. The unlatched one, the one that Kalowski had measured and documented, and that had not been followed up with urgency in those first crucial weeks. Ferrone also had the voice on the tape re-examined using the clean audio profile. The State Police Audio Forensics Unit concluded that the voice profile was consistent with Bernard Eckert. Not a legal identification, but consistent. And when investigators reviewed a deposition Eckert had given in an unrelated civil matter in 2004, they found a phrase in his recorded speech, a specific cadence, a specific vowel pattern that matched the cadence of the voice that had said, "Carol, it's me. Call me back on the evening she disappeared." He had called her. She had been alive when the phone rang. On the morning of June 7, 2023, 4 detectives and 2 officers from the New Jersey State Police arrived at Bernard Eckert's home in Flemington at 7:15 a.m. A neighbor, walking her dog, watched the patrol cars pull up. She would tell local press that she had stood on the sidewalk and simply not understood what she was seeing, that she had known Bernard Eckert for 11 years, that he had helped her carry groceries once when she had a broken wrist, that she had never once thought anything about him except that he was a quiet, ordinary man. Eckert came to the door in his housecoat. He looked at the officers. He said nothing. He was placed under arrest on charges of first-degree murder in the death of Carol Ann Brandt. The cuffs were applied in his doorway. He did not resist. He did not speak. A neighbor 2 houses down, who had come out onto his porch at the sound of the vehicles, watched from across the street with his coffee in his hand, and did not move for a long time after the cars were gone. In pre-trial proceedings, Eckert's defense challenged the admissibility of the fingerprint evidence on chain of custody grounds. The challenge was denied. His DNA profile was entered into evidence. The audio analysis was entered as corroborating material. In January 2024, Bernard Eckert pleaded no contest to first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. He made no statement at sentencing. He looked, throughout the proceedings, like a man waiting for a bus. Mary Ann Brandt was 78 years old. She was in the courtroom. She had been calling the Morris County Sheriff's Office since October 15, 1985, 38 years and nearly 3 months. When the sentence was read, she folded her hands in her lap and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and did not cry. She had done her crying at other times, in other places, across 4 decades of other moments. Paul Brandt was 54 years old. He stood outside the courthouse in Morristown afterward and told a reporter that he had spent his entire adult life not knowing, and that not knowing was its own particular kind of weight, and that the weight was different now. Not gone. Different. Carol Brandt put soup on the stove on a Friday evening in October 1985 because her son was coming home from football practice and she wanted him to find dinner ready. That was the entirety of the plan. A pot of soup. A son coming through the door. An ordinary evening in a split-level house on Birchwood Drive, in a town where nobody locked their doors. She deserved that evening. She deserved every ordinary evening that came after it. The case established, in the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, a new review protocol for cases with unmatched biological and fingerprint evidence from the pre-database era. A formal procedure now applied to 41 other open cases in the county. The voice analysis methodology used in the Brandt case has since been cited in 2 subsequent New Jersey cold case prosecutions. Raymond Kalowski never knew that the name on his index card was right. He had spent 22 years in that room with enough people to feel the difference between lying and withholding. And he had been correct, and he had died 12 years before anyone could tell him so. His index card, the one that said Eckert. Backdoor, voice on tape, listen again, was entered into evidence at the sentencing hearing. The prosecutor read it aloud. Marianne Brandt had asked her to. Justice takes the shape of the tools available to it. In 1985, those tools were not enough. By 2023, they were. What changes in between is not the truth. The truth is fixed from the moment of the act. What changes is our capacity to reach it. 38 years is a long time to keep calling. What does it mean to you that Marianne Brandt kept making that drive to the sheriff's office twice a year, for decades, when nothing was moving? And for those of you who have followed cases where old fingerprint evidence finally found a match, do you believe there are others like Bernard Eckert still waiting in ordinary lives for a database to finally catch up to them? Leave your thoughts below. We read every comment. Justice found Carol Brandt after 38 years. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe. More cases are waiting in the description below, and every one of them belongs to someone who deserved better. Thank you for watching. Script total: approximately 3,920 words. Estimated runtime at 145 words per minute. Approximately 27 minutes.